They say night guards are supposed to watch the place, but sometimes the place watches back. My name's Daniel Reyes, and about 6 years ago, I worked the night shift at the old Riverside Mall, a 3-story shopping complex that had been shut down for years after a fire in one of the food courts. The mall's owners were preparing to reopen it after renovations, and they hired a handful of temporary guards to monitor the property overnight. Most people wouldn't take that job, not after the stories. There were rumors that the mall was cursed, that the fire wasn't an accident. Some said a homeless man had died in the blaze, trapped inside one of the service corridors. Others said he never left. I didn't care. I needed the paycheck. The first night, I reported for duty just before midnight. The parking lot was empty, the moon reflecting faintly off shattered glass windows and half-finished construction scaffolding. Inside, the mall was a labyrinth of dust, plastic sheets, and the faint smell of smoke that still clung to the air years after the fire. The security office was on the second floor, right beside what used to be an arcade. The room was cramped, just a chair, a bank of monitors, and a flickering fluorescent light that buzzed like an angry fly. The cameras showed long, empty corridors lined with mannequin displays, their plastic faces lit by dying bulbs. There was something unnerving about them, the way they seemed to stand at perfect attention, always turned slightly toward the camera, as if posing for something unseen. Around 1:15 a.m., I did my first patrol. Most of the lights in the mall were out except for a few emergency lamps, so I relied on my flashlight. Every step echoed off the marble floor, bouncing down the empty halls like ghostly whispers. When I reached the old food court, I stopped. The air was colder there, even though the AC had been disconnected long ago. I panned my flashlight across the tables, overturned chairs, half-melted signs, the faint black marks where the fire had started, and then I heard it. A faint shuffle, like footsteps dragging across the tiles, slow, deliberate. I turned quickly, the beam cutting across the shadows. Nothing. Probably rats, I muttered under my breath, though my voice sounded strange, hollow. But as I walked past the old pizza counter, something caught my eye. A reflection, faint but unmistakable, in the metal oven door. Someone was standing behind me. I spun around. No one. The hallway stretched empty, silent. My own reflection in the oven was trembling. I took a deep breath, my fingers tight around the flashlight. "You're just spooking yourself," I whispered. "Just nerves." I went back to the security room, locked the door, and stared at the monitors. At first, everything was normal. Just empty corridors, still mannequins. Then, on camera 6, something changed. There was a shadow, faint but moving. It crossed from one end of the hallway to the other, too fast, too fluid to be human. The mannequins in that corridor seemed different. Their heads, which had been facing away, were now turned toward the camera. One of them, I swear, was smiling. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and the image flickered back to normal. The hours dragged by. I forced myself to stay awake, listening to the low hum of the monitors, the faint creak of air vents. Then, just after 3 a.m., one of the monitors, camera 9 near the service corridor, cut to static. A few seconds later, another, camera 10, went dark. Then another, and another. One by one, the screens blinked out until only one remained. Camera 12, pointed directly at the security office door. The feed showed the door from the outside, and in the glow of the emergency light, I saw it. A figure standing just beyond the threshold, tall, thin, unmoving, its head tilted slightly like it was listening to the sound of my breathing through the walls. Then, slowly, the figure leaned forward, and the screen went black. That was the first night. The night I realized this place didn't sleep. It watched. I remember that second night vividly. It was colder than the first, though the air conditioning in the office building was supposed to be off after hours. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you feel like you're not supposed to be there. I clocked in, signed the logbook, and made my usual patrol around the first and second floors. Everything looked the same. Dim lights, silent hallways, and the faint hum of the exit signs. But something felt heavier, like the air itself was watching me. The place was a corporate office complex. Glass walls, cubicles, conference rooms, and endless corridors. The kind of modern building that should feel safe, but at night, it transformed. The glossy floors reflected the overhead lights in strange ways, making it seem like figures moved just outside my vision. Every time I turned my head, nothing was there. Just that echoing silence. Around 1:30 a.m., I was sitting near the lobby, scrolling through my phone, when I heard it, a faint thump. Then another. It sounded like footsteps on the second floor. Slow, deliberate, spaced out. I froze. The motion sensors in this building were sensitive enough to pick up even a rat. If someone was up there, the cameras should have already flagged it. I checked the monitor screen in the control room, but the feed was blank for the upper corridor. Black screen, static buzzing faintly. The system wasn't supposed to do that. I grabbed my flashlight and walked to the elevator, but then I thought better of it. The elevator doors had a habit of creaking open slowly, and the sound echoed like something breathing in the dark. Instead, I took the stairs. Each step up felt heavier than the last. I kept trying to tell myself it was just another late-night cleaner, or maybe a coworker who forgot something. But deep down, I knew the janitor only came on weekends, and no one else had keys at this hour. As I reached the second floor, the hallway stretched long and empty before me. Rows of offices with glass panels. My flashlight beams swept across them, catching reflections of my own movement. But then, for a split second, I saw someone else's reflection. It was faint, standing in the glass of an office door about 30 feet ahead. A dark shape, tall, still, with its head slightly tilted. I blinked, and it was gone. I stayed rooted to the spot, my pulse hammering in my ears. I forced myself to move forward, calling out softly, "Hello? Anyone there?" No answer, just the buzz of the fluorescent light above me flickering on and off. I pushed the nearest office door open. The hinge let out a small squeal that made my stomach twist. Inside, the room was neat. Computers, chairs, papers stacked. I swept the flashlight beam across the corners. Nothing. Then came the footsteps again, behind me. I spun around, light cutting through the hallway, empty. But this time, the steps didn't fade away. They approached, slow, calm, like someone walking barefoot over the tiles. I could hear the faint drag, heel to toe. I backed up toward the office wall, flashlight trembling in my hand. "Stop right there," I said, trying to sound firm, but my voice cracked halfway through. And then they stopped. For a moment, the silence was so deep I could hear my own heartbeat. I dared to take one step forward, shining the light toward the corner of the hallway. Nothing. Just that oppressive quiet pressing against my chest. Then, click. One of the doors down the corridor slowly closed on its own. No wind, no movement. Just that sound of the latch catching. I rushed toward it, but the air grew colder with every step. When I reached the door and pulled it open, the room was empty again, except for one chair turned toward the wall. On the back of the chair was a set of wet footprints leading up to it, and then stopping, like whoever made them just vanished mid-step. I didn't sleep at all that morning after my shift. I told myself I'd imagined it, that maybe the pipes were knocking or the system glitched. But I couldn't ignore what I felt when I stood in that hallway. It wasn't just fear. It was presence. Something was up there with me that night. Something that knew I was alone and wanted me to know it too. The third night should have felt routine. I'd done 2 overnight shifts already, and part of me wanted to believe the footsteps, the wet prints, the closing door, everything was a trick of my tired brain. But as soon as I swiped my badge and stepped into that dimly lit lobby, I knew I wasn't walking into routine. The building had a mood again. You could feel it. The air hung heavy, a weight pressing on my chest the moment the door clicked shut behind me. I went straight to the security room this time. The small, windowless space sat behind a locked metal door on the ground floor. Inside, a bank of aging monitors buzzed with static and flickering images from the cameras posted throughout the building. Usually, the feeds were boring. Empty cubicles, closed conference rooms, silent corridors. But tonight, they were different. On the second monitor from the left, I caught a glimpse of movement. Just a flicker, like a frame, skipped in an old movie reel. Something tall, a blur of dark against the pale hallway floor. I leaned closer, squinting. Nothing. The corridor was empty again. I switched to manual control, scrolling through every camera one by one. The stairwell, the break room, the lobby, all empty. But when I clicked back to the second floor hallway, the one where I'd seen the footprints last night, there it was again. This time, it didn't flicker. A figure stood at the far end of the corridor, tall, motionless, too still to be human. The resolution on these cameras wasn't great, but I could tell something was wrong with it. Its outline blurred at the edges, as if it was melting into the shadows. I leaned so close, my breath fogged the screen. Then it moved. Not a step, not a turn, just a sudden, impossible shift. One moment at the far end of the hall, the next a few feet closer. Like the feed had jumped forward in time. I fumbled for the radio, but before I could press the call button, the monitors went black all at once. The power hadn't gone out. I could still hear the faint hum of the vending machine in the corner, but every single feed died simultaneously, replaced by a gray haze of static. I sat frozen, staring at the screens. The static hissed, loud enough to sound like whispering if you tilted your head. For a moment, I swore I heard my own name in it. Eli. I slammed my hand on the console. "Stop it," I muttered to myself. "You're just tired." And then the static cleared, on only one screen. It showed the control room, me, sitting exactly where I was, staring at the monitors. Except it wasn't live. It was delayed. A second off. I lifted my hand. On the screen, my hand lifted a moment later. My breath caught in my throat. Then, behind the version of me on the screen, a shadow appeared. It rose from the corner of the room, tall and thin, head bent just slightly like a person ducking under a doorway. It had no features, no face, only darkness that pulsed and writhed. I spun around, flashlight out. The corner was empty. On the screen, the shadow reached out toward the back of my head. I bolted from the chair, heart hammering so hard it hurt. The screen still showed me sitting there, unaware, the shadow's long fingers inches from my neck. And then, both the shadow and the version of me blinked out, replaced again by static. I backed into the hallway, slamming the control room door shut. My hands were shaking so bad, I almost dropped my flashlight. The hallway outside was silent. Not the kind of quiet where nothing is happening. The kind where something is happening, but it's holding its breath. I forced myself to breathe slowly, in and out. "You're imagining it," I told myself. Cameras glitch, feeds lag, shadows play tricks, but the weight in the air disagreed. It felt like standing under a thunderstorm, seconds before lightning strikes. When I finally worked up the nerve to peek back inside, the monitors were normal again. Empty halls, silent stairwells, nothing at all. But I didn't go back in. I couldn't shake the image of that delayed version of me, or the way the shadow's fingers had almost touched the back of my neck. After the incident with the security feeds, I swore I wouldn't return to that part of the building after dark. But duty calls, and I had to finish my rounds. The night was colder than before, and the fluorescent lights in the hallways flickered like they were struggling to stay alive. My flashlight carved a narrow path through the gloom, every step echoing off the empty walls like a countdown I didn't want to hear. I reached the stairwell that connected the second and third floors. Normally, this stairwell was unlocked for maintenance, but tonight, the door was secured with a heavy metal lock. My first thought was simple. Someone locked it from the other side. But that didn't make sense. Who else had access? No janitor, no security, no staff. Just me. My key didn't work. I tested the handle again and again. Click. Nothing. My pulse quickened. The stairwell was the quickest escape route if something happened upstairs. Not having access now made my chest tighten. Then I heard it, the faintest scrape, like nails dragging against concrete. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting across the corridor. Empty. Just the shadows of cubicles dancing on the walls. I returned to the door, trying to convince myself it was just metal contracting, settling. But the scraping sound came again, louder this time, closer. I backed away slowly, shining the light down the hall. My mind raced. Maybe it was a maintenance worker. No, they wouldn't be here at this hour. Maybe a student. Impossible. No student had keys to this area. Then it hit me. What if it wasn't human at all? I crouched near the stairwell door, flashlight steady in my trembling hands, listening. The scratching continued, then a soft, deliberate knock from the metal door. Tap, tap, tap. My breath hitched. Whoever, or whatever, was behind that door knew I was there. I could feel it. I wanted to run, but my body felt glued to the floor, paralyzed with that deep, primal fear you only feel when you know something dangerous is inches away. Then, silence. A pause so long it made my ears ring. I thought it had gone. I edged closer, hand on the handle, and as I did, I saw it. A shadow moving along the wall inside the stairwell. Impossible. There shouldn't have been any shadow. The stairwell was empty. I yanked my flashlight back toward the shadow and it vanished. But not before I caught the unmistakable shape of a tall figure crouching in the darkness, its head tilted, watching me. I stepped back. My flashlight slipped, clattering to the floor. The beam landed on the opposite wall, and for a split second, I could see its face, or at least the suggestion of one. A hollow, dark cavity where features should be. Eyes, black voids reflecting my own fear. I scrambled to pick up the flashlight, fumbling with my keys in my other hand, and in that moment, the shadow lunged, too fast, too fluid, like it wasn't bound by the rules of reality. I screamed, stumbled back into the hallway, and the stairwell door slammed shut behind me. I backed against the wall, heart racing, chest heaving. Every instinct screamed at me to leave the building, to run. But I had one last job to do: finish my rounds. I didn't know what I was more afraid of: the shadow in the stairwell, or the thought of walking past it again. Slowly, cautiously, I made my way past the stairwell and toward the exit doors. The building felt alive tonight, watching me, waiting for a mistake. My flashlight's beam jittered across the walls, and every dark corner seemed to pulse as though breathing. When I finally reached the lobby and the glass doors ahead, I felt a strange relief. Outside, the night air was crisp, cold, real. No shadows, no whispers, no unnatural movements. Just the city sleeping quietly beyond the campus. I glanced back at the building once before stepping out. The stairwell window was dark, still, silent, but I knew it wasn't empty. Whatever I had encountered had retreated for now, and I knew I would see it again. By the time my final overnight shift came around, I was already on edge. Every creak of the old building, every hum of the fluorescent lights set my nerves alight. Sleep had become a stranger over the past few nights. I hadn't even bothered trying to nap during the day. The images of that shadow, the delayed security feed, and the locked stairwell haunted me. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I arrived early, hoping to get a sense of calm before the night descended fully. The campus was quiet, eerily quiet. Even the usual hum of distant traffic seemed muffled. The lobby lights flickered faintly as I swiped my ID badge and entered. My steps echoed across the tile floors, and I felt the familiar chill in my bones. I headed straight for the security room, knowing I would have to check every camera feed before starting my rounds. I sat in front of the monitors, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, staring at the lifeless corridors on the screen. Nothing. For a few long minutes, nothing moved. The hum of the computers was almost comforting, like the heartbeat of the building itself. Then, the second floor feed flickered. I froze. At first, I thought it was a glitch, but my gut screamed otherwise. The faint, dark silhouette of a figure appeared in the hallway. Unlike before, it moved slowly, deliberately, not in a human manner, but as though gravity itself hesitated under its weight. The figure stopped at intervals, its shape stretching unnaturally, almost liquid, as if it could flow around corners. I felt the sweat prickling my neck. My fingers tightened on the mouse. I couldn't look away. And then, the figure disappeared. Just like that. My pulse racing, I checked the other cameras. Each corridor empty, silent, except for the one feed I hadn't touched yet, the stairwell. The stairwell feed showed nothing unusual until I noticed the shadow again. Only this time, it wasn't at the bottom or the middle. It was on the landing near the top, peering down at the empty stairwell. My chest froze. The shadow hadn't moved from the camera's perspective, yet I could feel its attention on me, as if it knew I was watching. I took a deep breath and reminded myself of my plan. Tonight, I had to confront it, or at least complete my rounds without incident. I armed myself with my flashlight, radio, and my own sense of determination and began walking through the dim hallways. Every sound, the drip of a faucet, the distant buzz of a light, the faint hum of the ventilation system felt amplified. As I approached the stairwell, I stopped. My hand rested on the door handle. The metal was cold beneath my palm. I took a deep breath and stepped in. The stairwell smelled of old concrete and dust. Shadows pooled in the corners. I held the flashlight up, scanning each step, each landing. Nothing. Just the building breathing around me. I reached the second-floor landing and froze. The shadow was there, as if waiting. My heart hammered in my chest, but I refused to run. I forced myself to step forward. And then, just like that, it vanished. The air seemed to settle. The oppressive weight lifted slightly. I completed my round slowly, every nerve alert. Nothing else appeared. By the time I returned to the security room for the final check, the sun was just beginning to lighten the sky. The building no longer felt alive. It was silent, safe. I shut down the monitors, packed my things, and left the campus, my legs still shaking. I never returned to the building at night again. Whatever had been there, watching, waiting, had retreated, for now. Even today, I can't explain what I saw. No one believes the details, but I know what I experienced, and I know that shadow is real. And sometimes, when the wind is just right and the campus is quiet, I swear I can still feel its eyes on me, just out of reach.